All right. Hello, everybody. It's happy to see everybody's shiny faces. I'm seeing everybody. Okay, good.
Well,
My name is Carolina. I'm here from Quest Mystic, and today we're going to talk to John. Is it Marani? How do you pronounce your
correct. Hmm.
okay,
Marani.
Marani? Yes,
Yes.
great. And Andrea Gehrz from Moira Press, and I also have Julia here joining me. So before we dig in, I was thinking that each of you, John and Andrea, could give us a quick introduction of who you are and what makes you tick and why you're here.
Okay. Who else?
Mm.
Andrea, go ahead.
Okay. Well, many people call me Andy. Just I guess that makes me tick when people call me Andy. But yeah, people know me as Andrea Gehrz in the public, and I have been an astrologer for about 24 years. Now, of course, I do other things. I play the piano. I have a kid. I'm a sign language interpreter. But what really makes me tick is astrology. I love reading charts. I love teaching astrology. I love currently for all the astrologers out there, Pluto by transit has entered my ninth house. And so the reason I started the astrology school is because my transits are going to school essentially. And I try to just live to what my chart is doing. So that's where the school came from. And Pluto will be in my ninth house for 20 years. So it's going to be a 20-year endeavor. It's not like a year-long transit or anything like that. So yeah, the next phase in my astrological development is running a school, and I've done many things in astrology. In my younger years, I did thousands of readings. About 2 years ago, I purged 4 feet of charts. That was the chart drawings that I'd made, literally 4 feet of them. So I've probably seen maybe 6,000 charts in my career. Maybe that's an overestimation. But then I taught at the Portland School of Astrology for 7 years. And then I've published 15 books in astrology. So I've done a lot of things, all building up to me running my own school. I mean, the books that we published, I didn't know it at the time, but they're now the textbooks that we use at the school. So it just is kind of a natural evolution. So yeah.
Thank you. And I will say that I am a past student of Andy's, and I loved it.
Yeah. I loved it too.
All right, John, do you want to share?
Hi, everyone. John Marani here. My background is in both tarot and astrology, so I've been doing both for 34 years. I am a practicing astrologer and tarot reader locally here in the Washington, D.C. area. My background in astrology is mostly self-taught. I've studied with a number of different people privately. I've studied with Kathy Rose. I've studied with Liz Hazel. I've studied with Jacqueline Janes. I was a student at the Midwest School of Astrology for 3 years for their certificate program, working with Pam Gallagher. Once I finished that, I started working with NCGR and was certified in 2018 as a level 1 with NCGR. Currently, I'm also heavily involved with NCGR. I'm actually the NCGR's National Technical Director. I'm also the president of the local Chesapeake chapter here in the Washington, D.C. area that actually serves Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. So I'm very active in astrology locally. I love astrology and tarot. I'm not prepared to say which one I like more. I think they both are incredible disciplines. My most recent title, I guess, is as Director of Instruction and Dean of Students for the Moira Press. One of the passions that I have inside of astrology is teaching. And so for me, I love seeing people teach and present astrology well, because I feel like when we're able to do that, we command a lot more respect. I've seen a lot of people present not very well, and it actually drives me nuts. Andy also has nicknamed me the Angel of Sanctions because I'm very, very specific about what I think instructors should be doing and not doing in the classroom. I have, generally speaking, other than astrology and tarot, I have an educational background. So I've studied language teaching to adults. That was what my master's is in. And then I also have done a lot of work since then, leading, mentoring, and guiding people over the years, both as students and as clients. So I have a passion for teaching, and that's one of the reasons why Andy brought me aboard. So we can work with people who we think have a lot of potential teaching and make them even better. But part of my goal in astrology is to become a really well-known teaching consultant for anyone who wants to teach or present in astrology. Thank
I
you.
like, I like that mission.
So can I add something after hearing John? I should add my educational background and where I learned astrology because I didn't say that part. So I actually went to Kepler College of Astrological Arts and Sciences for several years, and then I branched out of there and learned Greek and Latin at Portland State University in order to read the ancient Greek texts. So I've done a lot of Hellenistic and ancient Greek translations. I worked as a sign language interpreter for 24 years now. So at the time, I knew that I could wrangle these translations because of my work as an interpreter. So that I went and learned Greek and Latin. But a lot of my education comes from Kepler, but then a lot of it also comes from reading the actual ancient Greek text, which is an education in unto itself. And John, I have to tell you, I'm reading the book How to Win People Over and Influence People or whatever. And the first lesson is to not critique people. So I just want you to know that you're not winning anyone over.
Yeah, I get, and this is why my nickname is the Angel of Sanctions, is because in my day-to-day job, my full-time job, I do a lot of teaching and I teach teachers. And so as that process goes on, I have to do a lot of teaching critiques. And so Andy likes to give me a hard time about me being the Angel of Sanctions, but I actually embrace that title pretty well because um, somebody has to tell you what you're doing wrong, and because if they don't, you can't fix it. And one of the challenges I have seen is that a lot of people think that they present extremely well because everyone on them around them wants to say, "Oh, you did a good job," but no one ever really says, "Okay, you did a good job, but here's what you can do better."
Well, and you do have a Capricorn moon and Capricorn rising, so you were literally born to lay down sanctions. So, do what you're born for.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, I can hear that. Julia, do you want to start?
Yeah, so both of you kind of like talked about my first question, but um I wanted to kind of get more of a backstory because you both talked about your educational experiences, but what got you into what you are doing now? What is your story behind what you do?
You want to go first this time?
Sure. So the story behind what I do really started honestly almost 35 years ago. I got my first deck of tarot cards and I had my astrology chart done for the first time on the same day. And that was in August of 1989, which seems like forever ago, and it probably was. Anyway, so that really got me started on kind of the metaphysical path. Before that, I had a great aunt also who was a Scorpio, and I noticed that I had a number of cousins, and I noticed that she treated all of us who were Scorpios differently. Maybe a little harder sometimes, but usually as we got older, a little better. And she was a Scorpio too. And so that kind of made me think, like, what's the deal with this? Like, is this some kind of like criminal group or something? Like, what am I actually involved in? And so from then on, I really had all these questions about, well, what's a Scorpio? What am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? And then to me, once any Scorpio gets a feel for any kind of divinatory activity, they want to know, okay, what's really going to happen? And so that experience early on really drove me. I went to college and was reading tarot and doing a little bit of astrology, but basic sun sign stuff. I really didn't get into charts until much later, but I was doing a lot of tarot. I lived overseas in France for a year. I'm also a translator interpreter for French. And so I spent a lot of time over there doing readings both in English and French for people. That continued. I didn't actually start doing any kind of metaphysical work professionally until 2005 when I started my tarot business. That's been going ever since. And then I started doing charts officially in 2009. And so that's where it kind of came from. But I see astrology as a tool. It's a tool that people can use to their advantage. And that's one of the things I like most about Andy's philosophy about using your transits, because a lot of people don't think about it. They think about it, oh, I have to hunker down. I can't, what I can't do. But the thing is, what can you do? What I specifically like dealing with people who are afraid of Mercury retrograde, because I'm the first person to tell them, like, hey, listen, here's a whole list of things you can do during Mercury retrograde. And what's interesting is a lot of the interviews and important things that have happened to me when in communication have happened during Mercury retrograde. So one of my big philosophies in astrology is use what you have. We all have a birth chart. We have to play the cards we're dealt, but how we play them and how we work with the transits is up to us. I have a very big problem with people who want to say, oh, I have insert astrological thing here in my chart, and so I am insert result here. I really don't think that that's appropriate. I think that may be where you start, but my motto has always been the chart is where you start and you decide where you finish. So, Julia, does that answer your question?
It does. You actually answered my question and gave me more, so that's great. And I think it would also be good for the viewers watching to know that about you as well. So thank you. Andrea,
Certainly.
your turn.
Sure. Well, I would say that this probably started 2000 years ago when a lot of astrologers think I'm Thrasyllus reincarnated. So Thrasyllus was the astrologer to the Roman emperor and was in a lot of peril and but also was a Greek grammarian living in Rome. So anyways, my South Node line runs through Rome and I'm a Greek grammarian. So anyway, when I found astrology, I was like, there it is. I wasn't like, oh, what is this thing? I was like, oh, finally, there it is. You know, when I was in middle school, I had 108% in class, and my teacher was like, I was a little bit ill behaved, and he's like, never had a student like this. I wanted to kick out of my class so bad, you know, and it's like astrologers are a little rogue, you know, but I can sure as heck draw circles into the geometry of charts like nobody's business. So when I found it, it was really something that I already knew in some ways. And my dad is an astrophysicist, and my mom's a counselor. And so I think I'm like the merging of those two in this lifetime. You know, I was born on a telescope. My dad actually built the largest infrared telescope in the world when I was a kid, and I remember him being on 2020 and like doing all this thing. Now he works on Spitzer and Hubble and everything like that. And he's, you know, we still talk astro all the time, of course. It took me a lot to impress my dad. I mean, that's where all the ancient Greek translations come in. It's like he's finally like, maybe she's doing something like after all this, you know, because like he built the largest infrared telescope. So I mean, what are you gonna do? You know, it's hard to impress the guy. But he has a Gemini moon and I have a Gemini rising, and I'm a lot like him. So I do think I'm a little more occulty because I'm a Libra Scorpio sun, and so I have Mercury and Scorpio ruling my chart. So I'm also an occultist here. But when I found astrology in my adult life, I said, "Is this for real?" And I remember I had a girlfriend at the time, and she said, "You're obsessive. You obsess about everything." She's like, "Here's an astrology book. Obsess on this." So I just did. My Mercury and Scorpio took to that, and just perseverated on that for the rest of my life. So, yeah. And then I just noticed that I had kind of a photographic memory for chart. Once I knew what transits were, and I could read transits, it's like I would see a chart and then I would see all the transits and I could just remember charts with degrees, and to the point where finally after 6,000, I think I started to purge some of them. And but I kind of had the problems of like having all these charts in my head. I mean, that's like autism at its best, is like you're trying to act normal with like 6,000 charts going on. And so I really do think whether or not it's a past life thing or it's just my natal chart, but I literally am built for this. Like so that's probably the real story.
I love those.
Mm.
I love it. I also like how you reflect on family connections. And that was one dear thing that I learned early on, was how things repeat themselves for whatever reason across the generations, or mimic themselves. Um, and so what is your mother's sign? You have your dad.
She's a Libra and I'm a Libra sun, and my dad's a Gemini. So like I get the professor from my dad and the people skills from my mom.
I love it. I love it. My dad's an Aquarius, my mom's a Virgo, and my Mars is an Aquarius. My mom's stuff all sits in the seventh house, so I see it all the time.
Yeah, the family dynamics layer is definitely interesting. In fact, Ptolemy, who wrote the Tetrabiblos 2,000 years ago, one of my favorite ancient Greek books, he said there was four influences on a growing creature, and he said there was genetics, culture, climate, and your chart. And I think family dynamics layer comes in the culture and climate that you're growing in. Is like,
Mhm,
who raised you and what does that look like? And
mhm. Yeah. How about you, John? How was your family connection in your chart?
Honestly, to both my parents, I really don't have a strong astrological connection to them. My dad's chart and mine are almost completely different. He's Virgo sun, Aries moon. Um, he actually, it's funny though, my dad and my wife both share Virgo sun, Aries moon. I don't share that with him, but she does. My mother is Cancer sun, Aquarius moon. And so for me, I grew up in a house where I had a Cancer mom, I had a Virgo dad, and then I had three brothers and sisters, and each one of them were a different element. So I got exposed to all the elements early on. So my older sister is a Gemini and a lawyer, go figure. My younger sister is Taurus, and she is Taurus sun, Pisces moon, and mother of four children under 10.
Hmm.
And then my little brother is Sag Sun, Gemini Moon, and he actually travels about 85% of the time for work and has more cell phones in his possession that he's responsible for than any other human I've met. So sounds about right to me. But no, with my family, I really don't. I'm really unique in the fact that I really don't have many connections to any of them.
Hmm.
You know, I have that experience with my Pisces moon. Like my parents don't have any water in their chart, and I never saw them cry. Never saw them. They're not super musical. I mean, they did play some musical instruments in school and stuff. But at the age of 4, I was like, "Can I play the piano?" And I took piano lessons. And I would come home from high school weeping and crying and playing the piano for 2 hours a day. And like, I think astrology would say that everyone thinks we're little replicas of our parents, but the astrology layer would say that we are our own machine growing, and that's burned into our chakras at the moment of birth and our eyeballs and everything like that. And so, yeah, I like this examination of family layer, and then what is the, you know, chart growing here as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
I had Pluto over my Sun, midheaven, Mercury, and Venus during the 5 years where I was in high school and my freshman year of college. So when I started high school, I definitely felt Pluto. I had to commute an hour each way. Most of the time, I had literally 50 pounds of books and up to three musical instruments at a given time, 5 days a week. So it was definitely a Plutonian thing that I was going through. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, Pluto for sure.
That's wild. That's definitely an interesting thing. Um, Julia, you have more questions than I'll ask some more.
Okay, sure. So how do you help people with the work that you do? Whoever wants to take it first.
Guess it's my turn. Um, well, God, I think astrology helps people in manifold ways, honestly. It's funny because, a lot of people who don't know astrology have no idea how it can help. I'll give you two examples that are favorites of mine. My man is a big Capricorn, earthy kind of guy with a big belly, and when I met him, he'd had a lot of body image issues, and, he'd been on the dating scene, and women had told him he was too big and all this kind of stuff. And I was looking for a big bodyguard kind of man, personally, because of my Pisces moon. I was like, can you block the vibes from me, please? But anyway, uh, when he came over on our second date, I showed him a picture from this book. Here, I'll show it to you. Astrological body types. And I found the picture of the Capricorn moon and I showed it to him and I said, look, you look exactly like your chart. And it healed him from about 46 years of body shame. Well, I mean, he probably didn't have body shame till he got bigger when he was older. But one of the beautiful things here, I'll show you the picture I showed him. It's from this book, Astrological Body Types by Judith Hill. And I showed him this picture, which is exactly what he looks like and his body, like if you knew him. And that, he said no matter what he does, even if he loses 100 pounds, he literally looks that body type and he can't actually get out of it. And so, he said that healed him from years of body shame. And so one of the things that astrology can do is heal you by showing you who you are specifically. Astrology was actually built on something, a philosophy called teleology, which is the study of things becoming themselves. Right. So like the ancient teleologists would constantly compare people to plants. They would say like, oh, a radish plant is like this and a squash plant looks like this. And a watermelon is really big and round and full of water, like just like a watery person. So it's like, I'm watery. I have a belly too. I have a water belly, whereas my boyfriend has an earth belly and they're actually different. You can look at the constitution of chubbiness. It's actually, but a watermelon plant is full of water, and so it's like we actually look at things growing into themselves, not growing into something else. Whereas if you go to the doctor and they will constantly compare you against the weight BMI thing, and they say, well, a healthy adult human looks like this, and well, we're like, well, a healthy adult human of a certain form and shape looks like that. But according to your chart, you're actually cannot get out of the body that you're growing in some ways. So it's like it heals people from like medical trauma, traumas being compared to, charts and graphs and things like that. Some people are really lanky and they cannot put on weight at all. They have like 15 planets in air signs and they literally have no fat or phlegm humor in their body. Like they can't actually gain weight. And so they get ridiculed in the same way. Well, we know that they're built that way for a reason. Their blood is full of oxygen. They're actually more cerebral. They have a certain different machine that they're growing. So that's one way. And then a second way one favorite way is through transits. Transits are, we look at the moving hands of the planets applied to a chart. And you can think of that as a clock with 10 hands. My mentor Judith called it the qualitative clock, whereas the clock we look at on the wall is the quantitative clock. Oh, it's like, oh, it's 1 o'clock, but what time is it astrologically? Well, that's what time. What does it feel like? Is it time to eat? Is it time to dance? Is it time to get in a fight? What time is it? That's what the astrology tells you. So one of my favorite groups to work with is people who are bipolar. And, the doctors, they're always having this simplistic scale of like mania, depression, and then they have no idea when they're going to have these manias and all this. And as an astrologer, we can literally time manias. We like, it's like I time my manias to the hour. I'll be like, oh my God, I'm in a crocheting mania for 16 more hours. I'm making a stuffed animal. That's what I'm doing today. Like I would never waste a mania. And in fact, we're wasting people's manias all over the place. People are wasting their energy. They're full of chi. They can't figure out where the mania comes from. It comes from chi. It comes from sunlight, according to astrology. So another group I love working with is the bipolar people and teaching them how to tell time, basically. That takes me about, one of the reasons I run a whole school is I like to teach people how to read their own chart, which is to read transits. And that takes about a year or two. So that's another group I like to work with.
Thank you. Your turn, John.
So I my my big theme, no matter what it is, but especially in astrology, is empowerment. I actually have Pluto at 0 Libra in the 8th house. So I'm kind of put here to empower people. So simply, I try to empower people through astrology. Now, the way I do that is I like to show people the advantages that they actually have. In other words, what do you have in your chart that you can use to your advantage in your natal chart, but also based on the transits? Like what's happening right now and what can you use? Put even more simply, I like to help people lead their own lives. I've met people who want to just kind of sit around and wait for things to happen. And I've never been that sort of person. I'm kind of anticipating what's next. And so what I try to do is give people the opportunity to look at their own chart in a way that says, here are the skills that I have. Here are the skills that I can put to use every day. And at certain points with my transits, I have the opportunity to go even more, even further in ways that maybe I didn't even imagine, because now I have this transit or now I have that transit. And I often get people, as I mentioned earlier, who feel limited by their charts. And I think that's the wrong way to go. I have met people who have had charts that have been extremely challenging. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've cured them, because no one can cure a difficult chart. But I do help people work with their charts so that they can get a lot more perhaps out of their lives than they did just sitting and waiting and hoping for something to happen. I also specialize in working with people who want to be leaders, not just presenters, but leaders either in the corporate world or in the business world or in the education world. And my job is to try to help them see where they can lead. What skills do they have in their chart that set them apart from other people? And so, as I said, my big goal is empowering people with their chart and not seeing it as a limitation, but seeing where they can really improve their own lives by taking initiative. And some guidance from me will usually help with that.
Thank you. Carolina, did you want to ask something?
No, it's more a comment. Um, no, I love that those perspectives of empowerment and basically just looking at the gifts that we have been given, right? Because there is no changing the chart. And I feel like that's at that first sight of looking at one's chart is both that realization of like, oh, I am unique. This is cool. And then at the same time, you're like, oh, what does this mean? Oh, I can't ever change it. And for some, it could be a painful thing to experience that reality. I always look at it as like the cosmos is the fate. Like this, it's a we know exactly what's going to happen day in and day out, but we don't. But within that whole world, we have choice, and that's where your work comes in, is showing us what the choices are within those guideposts that we're working within. And so with that in mind, like, can you knowing that astrology is only going to grow bigger, right? We're just seeing at the next revolution of it. What do you see in the future with this knowledge for becoming more pervasive in the world?
I'll take that one first, Andy. What I see people who are going to make astrology more a part of their everyday life. I mean, when I grew up, it was something that you read for fun. It was in the papers. You just kind of looked at what your sun sign said, and you would some people would base their day on it. Some people wouldn't believe it at all. And so compared to where it was, and compared to where it is now, I feel like with the internet and mobile devices, it's all going to expand. The challenge that I see with that, and I think expansion is good. The challenge that I see with that, and this is, of course, Andy's going, uh-oh, here comes his Jupiter-Saturn opposition again. The challenge is that when we have all of this information at our disposal, the question becomes how we use it. And so I have seen things on social media about astrology that I kind of shake my head and go, I don't know that I'd say that to someone. As an astrologer, I feel like you always need to be very careful about what we say to people and how we say it, because we don't want people to. I'm not, I say often to folks, I'm not a gloom and doom astrologer. I never will be. There are going to be difficult transits that everyone has to deal with, but knowing what the transit is doesn't necessarily make it difficult. One example I have is the Saturn return, where I have clients who are 25, 26, 27, who are freaking out because they think that the Saturn return is going to be terrible. And what I tell them is, look, if you're doing the Saturn work, Saturn's about authority, right? If you are becoming the authority in your own life, then 29 and 30 may pass without a problem. I don't want people to sit at home kind of waiting for something to happen. And one of my favorite cartoons, memes that I've seen on Facebook is someone sitting there with a 28 on them and like Saturn coming up behind them with a club, just kind of like sneaking up behind. And I think it's funny, but I also think that's the way a lot of people feel. And so as people get more information, my concern is that they don't get the whole picture. They just get this tiny little piece. And so they assume, for example, that their Jupiter transit is going to be amazing and their Saturn transit is going to be terrible. And as a Saturn ruled guy, like, no, I certainly have had my struggles with Saturn, but as a guy who's survived liver cancer, I would say I've also survived Jupiter too. So, again, as I said, I think the information is going to become more and more pervasive. I think people will start to use it more in their day-to-day lives. One area that I think has really expanded that I've seen in my practice is astrocartography. The woman with the really difficult chart that I mentioned earlier, if she moved to Europe, her chart would be beautiful. Like her chart would actually be a whole lot better. But that didn't happen. But that gives you an idea. That's one of the other things that we can do with astrology is relocation astrology and astrocartography. And that's an area that I think is really going to explode. And in my practice alone, in the past month, I think I've done 2 different consults mainly focused on astrocartography. Again, I feel like the information is becoming more available. The question is getting people to use it in a way that's helpful and not causing anxiety or fear.
Well, I'll build on that. Like, okay, I know I'm supposed to sit in the corner and like be small, like that's like the humble thing to do, which people think is a good thing. And I dance the line of living out my purpose and being humble, but I will say that I do believe I'm one of the thought leaders in the field of astrology, and I do have an idea about what we're about to look at because I'm going to bring it to the whole crowd of astrologers. And that there's 2 things that I'm coming out this year with. One is astrological remediation, which I've already written the book on, and a lot of us know that already, but it's getting to the point where astrological remediation needs to be a concept that every single astrologer who's working understands. The fact that there are people working and telling people about their charts and saying like, you have a Mars square Pluto or you have a moon conjunct Saturn, but they don't know what remediation is, that's actually a problem for astrologers. In fact, in India, where astrology didn't get subjugated by Christianity for 2,000 years, they have had remediation going steady for 2,000 years without this kind of lacking of, this whole thought structure. So my goal would be for astrologers when they get planets in transit, which is probably the most pinnacle text that we have as astrologers. Most astrologers have planets in transit by Robert Hand because this is how we look up our transits and we learn to look at transits. Well, we also need to have astrological remediation on the table next to planets in transit. You shouldn't even be looking at a transit that's bad unless you know what the remedies are. Like, that's actually why we look. You don't, I mean, it can be kind of soothing to look in the past and say, I had a bad transit, that was my breakup. Like, it wasn't me, it was in the planets. But we definitely want to be able to predict for the future and how to, use our planetary equipment for the good of all concerned. Carolina, you talked about how the chart is something we find out we have and then we're stuck with it. Well, you know what they would call a chart? Genesis. The Bible is called Genesis. Okay, so this is our genetics. It's as strong as saying to somebody you are genetically predisposed to be violent. If someone has a Mars, Moon, Pluto conjunction, they are genetically predisposed towards violence. Okay, and that is in their genesis. And so we shouldn't even be telling people about their genesis unless we know what remediation is. That is number one, what I think we need all astrologers to know. The second thing what we need all astrologers to know is teleology theory. Now, I think the whole actual United States needs to know what teleology is because, one of the biggest movements in astrology in the last 10 years has been Hellenistic astrology. I mean, I'm sure you guys know about Hellenistic astrology, but a lot of people listening might not know what that is. Well, Hellenistic astrology was the resurrection of ancient Greek texts into the modern lexicon of astrology, which is where our lineage of astrology comes from. Well, there's all this Hellenistic astrology and they're looking at all this faded stuff and they got really scared because there's a anthology called the Vettius Valens anthology. It's a 9-book anthology written by this old Scorpio guy living 2,000 years ago. And he's really dark, he's really morbid, and he's really beautiful explaining the fates of astrology. For example, he would say that Mars brings shouting and shrieking and bloodshed. Okay, so that scares people. Okay, number one, you can use remediation, but number two, the reason they were doing that is because they were teleologists and they knew teleology. So they were trying to explain a thing growing into itself. And let's say we have an ultimate fighter, right, who goes into the ring and there's shouting, shrieking, and bloodshed. That is one thing that grows in humans is fighter spirits, is warriors, right? And they wanted you to be able to look at a chart and see this baby's going to be a warrior from the time it's born so that you can start tailoring the chart to be a warrior, right? And you can grow an ultimate fighter instead of a serial killer. Like, that was the point of Hellenistic astrology being that fated, right? So what we need to do is take Hellenistic astrology, which is like this hugely popular thing now, and we need to say, okay, this is teleology, though. Okay, it's fine if you're going to be super fated about everything, but we need to know that the reason to do that is to look at things growing into themselves and then mold and shape them, just like a farmer would mold and shape a plant, or a a dog owner might mold and shape a dog. You don't just let it go out biting people, you train it and so I think teleology and astrological remediation are going to be, at least on my side of the world, going to be the next huge push that we're going to go. And I'm going to go 10 years on these things until every astrologer in every astrology school knows these things.
You have 20 years, man. 20 years.
Oh yeah, I got 20 years.
20 years for you in your ninth house, 20 years in my 12th.
Nice. I'll talk to you in private about it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Oh boy. I don't know if I have any like major thoughts come or questions to ask you guys. You've covered a lot, and I know that from me watching from the outside, I've seen you hold a lot classes each day of the week almost. Is that correct?
Hmm?
Yeah, you want to talk to us a little bit about your classes and your class structures?
Sure. Do you want me to go first, John? Or okay. So the Moira Press School is an everyday school. A lot of people think, oh, that seems like too much, or that's so much programming. But a philosophy student in a philosophy program at a university goes to class 5 days a week, and then they have friendships on the weekends, and they have a whole program of life. Astrology doesn't, we don't live in university settings where there is we can't be housed under philosophy, although we could be. We're kind of technical philosophers. But we are trying to create a program that's robust enough that people actually feel like they can grow friendships in a community. And, seeing your friends daily, or, we have reading groups on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. They cost $7. I mean, that's as much of a cup as a cup of coffee, or, a cup of coffee and a donut. And you can come to a reading group and read with your professor. That would be me, the person who's translated the books. So we'll read it from the Tetrabiblos, but also I've translated it in Greek and read it in Greek. So if we come across a part that we don't understand because it's speaking to teleology, for example, I can stop and explain, oh, what he's saying is X, Y, and Z. But we can do that with friends. A lot of our students make great friends at school. I'm still friends with a lot of my friends from astrology school. We still do projects and work together. So we're trying to have a robust enough environment that people can actually enjoy the process. And the worst thing that happens is we have goose eggs. Like sometimes we get zero registrations. I mean, I'm being honest, and I have no idea what's going to be a goose egg. Like, I offered a medical astrology class the other day, and it was just zero registrants. But that was right when we got back from NORWAC, the Northwest Astrological Conference. So I think the timing of that is just we're at the conference. So that's why it was a goose egg. But I mean, the worst thing that happens is I go and read my book instead of teach class. But yeah, that actually rarely happens. So yeah. We have events 7 days a week.
Just to keep in mind that the internet does go on vacation in the summer. It's a real thing. I remember when I first discovered when I started working in that field, I was like, wait a second, the emails have stopped.
Yeah, that's what one of my producers told me yesterday. He's like, "Oh, everyone's out camping," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, we're a school. We're not the internet. We're not social media. We're a school." Like, I don't know, and you don't really give up on your friends in the summer. Like, but I'm a steady Eddie. Like, I'm a Scorpio on the sixth house. It's like I'm a fixed sign. Like, I show up every day like a fixed. That's me being fixed, so that everyone else can, come and go camping. Like, I don't want to go camping. I want to study some occult texts. Like, I don't really like if we go camping. I'm like, the trees aren't talking to me about freaking ancient Greek astrology. This is so boring.
Yeah, we would be great camping buddies for sure. I generally bring like all my books and then my knitting supplies and then what other art supplies. So like I try to cover all my bases of interest levels, you know, options. They're good.
Do you want to talk about the classes, John, or what do you think about the programming?
Well, so one of the most interesting things that drew me to the Moira Press is that you have access to somebody who I think is one of the premier astrologers in the United States, in Andy. I mean, to be able to spend time with her, to talk to her, that in and of itself is worth so much more than money. Because if you actually had to charge what I thought it was worth, like I don't think anyone would actually be able to afford it. That's how much I respect and admire the work that she's done, the work that she continues to do. Honestly, she pushes all of us to be better astrologers. And I'm totally here for it. Like that was one of the things where I knew I wanted to be involved in some capacity in the school. Um, I love the classes. Andy has a really different teaching style that she does exceptionally well. I feel like that draws people in and it makes people really think about what they're doing. I've seen astrology schools and courses where they have their syllabus and they're just kind of doing what I would call the forced march through the text. Okay, well, Venus in Scorpio is this, and Venus in Sag is this, and tomorrow we're going to finish Venus in Capricorn. And there's no application of the material. And that's one of the things I love most about Andy in the school is that she teaches people how to apply astrology to their lives. It's not just this dry academic topic. Okay, so Andy in a classroom is never dry and academic. So let's say that anyway. But honestly, I feel like there you go, Macho Man Randy Savage. Yes.
It's my spirit animal.
But I feel like people at the school get a really unique opportunity to work with someone of her caliber. I don't even think a lot of people understand how rare and amazing that is. I mean, for the most part, you get those opportunities through astrology conferences where you show up and you see these people. And I can tell you that the school that Andy is building here is something that I am extremely honored to be a part of. One of the things that I've taken on is I've taken on the idea of director of instruction. So what I'm trying to do is give a little more overall structure to what we're teaching, how we're teaching it, who is teaching it, from my educational background in both teaching, but also in instructional design. So I bring a more, I don't know, a more academic focus to the instruction, the pedagogy piece, if you will, to use that term. I also, because of my experience in tarot, I've also started a tarot track at the school. So in addition to doing an astrology forum on Tuesday nights, which we normally do, we now have a tarot forum every Wednesday night. And we've only been doing that for about a month, and it's been exceptionally well attended already, that I'm really happy about. And we're going to start some regular tarot classes coming up in July. So I'm really excited to take that track and build on it more. At the same time, I am very much interested in making sure that our students retain the material that we have. So I'm the guy who's talking about surveys and like how we administer the school and all of that. I very much have the Capricorn Moon Rising idea of, okay, you know, someone's got to do the background stuff in the school, and I'm here for it, and I love that stuff. Like I could talk about surveys and evaluating classes and instructional design all day long, which your learners probably aren't, your viewers probably aren't particularly interested in. So I won't go into huge detail on it now. But that's really where I feel like I fit in with the school, both as a tarot instructor, but also Andy and I do teach one class a month together, which I really enjoy. We have two very different styles, and I think people really do well with that. But I can't say enough about how thrilled I am to work with Andy. She's just someone I respect and admire so much, and I'm thrilled to be here for it.
Well, I'm gonna give you a compliment roast then, which is John is one of the reasons John became a co-teacher and administrator of the school is because his number one, his teaching style is so epically awesome. Like, just he calls on students, he doesn't lecture at them, he makes a point and then lets everyone discuss. I'm a Socratic. I believe in the Socratic method, and so he definitely is more on the side of Socratic method. He calls on students, he really cares about the students. And also, who do you know with 34 years of experience reading tarot? Like, I just have never even met somebody with that level. And you also have some certifications in tarot too. So I think the tarot side of the school is getting really robust all of a sudden and really fast. And like they're all really impressed with what's going on that side. So I think we're both holding it down, John, both of us. And
What's
the guest teachers too.
Yeah, I like that angle, but I want to first go back. When's the next class where the both of you are co-teaching?
We don't have one on the schedule, I don't think. Because
We need to put one on the books probably for July, I think, because I think June is pretty booked, as I recall.
Yeah, we're booked out for a while, but yeah, we should do that. We should get back to that. I think the tarot side of things kind of took over for you. So, and you're moving, right? And I'm moving, so we kind
And
of
I'm
had a
moving. Yeah, we're both moving. So yeah.
Okay. Julia, did you have any last questions?
Yeah, it's actually the final question that I have, and I think that it would be good to talk about this also a lot. You kind of talked about it a little bit, but if you want to expand, if you can, that'd be great. Do you have any plans for your school in the next 5 to 10 years? So going forward, what are your plans?
Andy, you start.
okay. Well, it's kind of a co-creation. We are a servant leader based school with a democratic collectivist approach. So we actually listened constantly to feedback from students on Facebook. I just got on Instagram for the first time in my life the other day because I've been living on Facebook, and the reason for that is you can co-create with the crew. Basically, what do you all want? So in some ways, it's going to be a continued co-creation with the student body to see what they want and what they like. John's setting up a survey right now for that. So we're going to continue to do that. We're going to keep the vibe good by listening to people, to actually taking feedback. We've read some manager books on radical candor, so we're going to have an approach of we have rigorous transparency. We're always doing stuff administratively online where people can see, so they know how we're making our decisions and what we're doing. We're going to continue to do that. We'll be open to critiques, and I'm not a big critiquer though. Like I really just love people. I love their charts, so I just see people coming around and be living out their charts. If they're super talkative, then they can be a super talkative student. We might have to manage that in class. That's a class demand as a teacher. There's a demand control schema where you got a demand on you and you have to control it. Like, but that's not, we don't say like, oh, this person's talking too much and we're annoyed with them. We don't even get annoyed with them because that's their chart. Like, we're like, oh my God, that Mercury, Jupiter, Pluto conjunction keeps talking a lot. Like, isn't that cool? Like, look at it go. Like, so, but if we have a Mercury Saturn student who's really bound up in the throat chakra, we might call on them more to draw them out. I mean, I think in my vision, we look at the charts of our students and we know them. A lot of schools don't do that. They don't have time for that. My other vision is to be accessible to my students in the office 8 to 4 on Facebook every single day of my week. I know that sounds crazy. I mean, there is going to be a point where I get too swamped. And part of having programming 7 days a week is I'm trying to not get so swamped that you can't get to me. It's like, yeah, there might be 5 or 7 people at class, but you can still get to me. See what I mean? But when I was doing one lecture a week, it was 27 people in there. And you can't get to me. You can't even talk to me. Like, I can't see your chart. Like, so I really want to keep the programming robust enough that there are small classes coming in all the time. So I, I guess I want to be rigorously available to the student body, no matter what happens. Now, I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll see. I had initially had the vision of letting a bunch of guest teachers teach because, in my crew, like my students were growing and they were getting to the point of teaching. And because we have a leadership approach where we're actually trying to make leaders out of people, we're not just developing followers, where everyone's becoming a telos and a leader and they're growing into themselves. And so we're trying to transfer authority to them. That's part of the empowerment cycle. So we're like, oh, you can teach a class. Oh, you're ready to teach a class. And what I'm finding is that we don't have a professional marketing person, and so we're not able to honor those requests as much as we can because I can't get people in those classes as well as I would like to honor those people's time. So I'm having to switch the school to be a little bit more of like just the core teachers, like me and John, and then Fern on Night Stars on Monday, and then Jesse Zoldak runs a Course in Miracles on Sunday. So like we have a core of like 4 of us. And sadly, I just can't support like I'm not a conference. Like in a conference, you support all these guest teachers. We're more like like you go study with Andrea Gehrz at the Moira Press, or you study with John Marani at the Moira Press School. But we'll still have people. If someone brings a convincing class and a marketing plan, I would still take them, though. You know what I mean? It really depends. So.
See, I thought Andy was going to go total Macho Man Randy Savage and say, we are going to be the greatest astrology school in the world in 5 years, or I will die trying. That's what I thought you were going to say, but that's okay.
I'm really
The
into God's will being in charge. I really don't know if we're supposed to be great or
fair. Fair. And I would say that where I see us in 5 years is more developed in the sense that we have more people who have worked with us. We have more people who hopefully have enjoyed working with us, who would recommend us to others, who feel like we had a positive influence in their life, whether it was tarot or astrology, or they came to see a guest speaker. I want them to feel like no matter how many classes they've taken with us, that we've done a professional job, that we've helped them retain the material, that they felt like not just the money, but that the time was worth it. One of the big concerns whenever we design a class is called the WIFM, which is what's in it for me. And the thing is with adults, if you can't articulate what's in it for them, they're not going to show. And if they do show, they're going to they're going to be distracted. And especially in online learning, if you can't keep people's attention, it doesn't really matter how good the class design was. People aren't going to retain the material. And so for me, what I would like to say is in 5 years, I'd love to have the Moira Press have a lot more students who can honestly say that they have walked away with some knowledge that they've been able to put to use in their everyday life. And if I've been able to be a part of that, I'd be thrilled. I'd also be really happy with seeing some people come through the Moira Press who go on to become amazing astrology presenters. And speaking personally, even though I am more of a critique than the boss is, I absolutely hope that me being able to help them get there would be something that would be very important to me. But as I said, I'm very pleased to be a part of the school, even though I do sometimes look like the guy in the black hat, and that's okay. I'm good with that.
what's that mean?
That means I'm a villain.
Oh yeah, you are the villain. I was like, what are you trying to be a villain or something?
Yeah, well, yeah,
Critiquing
you call
everybody?
me, my dear, you call me the angel of sanctions for a reason.
Oh
At
my.
least I try to be nice about it.
Yeah, you are sweet.
I
So,
like this. I have a vision for you, and it's more about words if you wanted to manifest. And I just think holding that vision of a highly successful, growing, paying body of students that are themselves learning to become the next astrology leaders that we need is a great path. I hold that vision for you.
well, you're in the Moira Press manifesting crew. Whenever I do manifesting posts, I tag you and Jay-Z because you guys are good manifestors. And so, like, you can tailor our manifestation anytime. And, once you get your thing going, and I can't wait to interview Julia, and it was so nice to interview you. And I can't wait to have your thing going because we don't really specialize in the newbies. And I think it will be nice to have people like you who really are good with the newbies. We're kind of training the advanced astrologers to be excellent and even more advanced is kind of our. But
Don't worry, we will teach all. We will cover the whole world with astrology knowledge.
oh yeah, teleology will be a household word. In
Yes.
ancient times, they all knew about teleology. And in fact, Jesus said in the last sentence of his life, and Demetra George told me this the other day, she wrote it in her book, that in the last sentence of his life, he said, I have fulfilled my telos and I can die now. Even Jesus knew what teleology was. And when I read the Bible in ancient Greek, in order to be able to read these ancient books, they talked all teleology. And it's like the fact that we're missing teleology is actually really problematic. Like, the modern person is kind of like because they don't know teleology. Like Macho Man Randy Savage, man, he was a real character. He was growing into himself. He's like, wow. He's like, can you imagine what his mom thought? He's a Scorpio, John. He's a Scorpio with his sun sextile Mars in Capricorn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any last thoughts, Julia?
No, I feel like we covered a lot, and I also feel like you both are doing wonderful things with the school and everything. And I really liked hearing the backstory, with the books and everything that you shared. And John, you do a really good job with also all the managing. That's a lot to do, like the surveys and getting people's feedback. That's a lot. So you really do a great job with all the managing. I can totally see how that can be. And I just want to say also thank you both so much for your time and everything, because I know that you're both busy. So thank you both for your time. And I wanted to have people know more about you and everything because what you're doing, I think, is great. So I wanted to have you both on.
Thank you, Julie. I can't wait to interview you. John, we should tell them how to find us.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
So it's actually kind of easy and kind of difficult. Like we don't have really you have to find us on Facebook, honestly. If you really want to get in the mix and really be part of the co-creation of the school, Facebook me or John, and that would be my name, Andrea Gehrz. It's Andrea, and then Gehrz is Gehrz, or John Marani, John, and then Marani. You can actually go to moirapress.com and you will be sent to my website where there's an events tab. And if you just click on the events tab, you'll get all the events for the school. That's how do you tell people to find us?
So I usually tell them Facebook to look you up on Facebook is what I do. What I've also done on my own personal website, which is astrotarotjohn.com. That's how I go online. I actually have a whole section on the Moira Press. So when you go in, you'll see at the top of the screen Moira Press. You click and you can go there and get the whole schedule for the school. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, and she already mentioned him, but I will. Shane, who is the technical backbone of our school. He recently started the store where you can purchase classes from us. And I just love the man. I think he's wonderful now. He and I both have a Capricorn moon and we both have similar body types. And he just seems like a great guy. And I can't wait to meet him in person. But in any case, yes, I tell people usually to go to you, Andy, but they can also come to me. And they can go to my website as well and then go to the Moira Press drop. They can go to the Moira Press link. It's right there.
And you also have a website for your school, moirapress.com.
Yeah.
Correct.
Cool. Cool. Well, thank you guys. It's
Thank
been a
you.
pleasure. I really enjoyed learning about your backgrounds and the little tidbits of wisdom that you have to share. And I would agree with you, Andy, that there's a lot of missed information out there, and I'm happy that you guys are bringing that to the forefront. And we will connect again. So I'm going to stop
Yes.
the recording.
Agreed. I'll
Thank you
put the
so much.
information. I'm going to put the information about how to contact